Last Broadcast, if people will remember, came out in 1997. It was made for approximately, what, $600 or $800 at the time?
It was actually a little more than that. It was $900.
Oh, $900, and went on to gross $4.5 million in its release. Lance, where did that come from? How does it relate? And this is the exciting part, is there is a relationship to your first exploration in net communication and reaching out to an audience, and what Aaron and Susan have accomplished with Four-Eyed Monsters over its beginnings.
Yeah, basically The Last Broadcast was a film that we made out of frustration of the process. I made it with a partner, Stefan Avalos. Stefan had made a film on 16 millimeter, and he had been ripped off in distribution, and I was trying to raise money for $2.5, I guess $250,000, $250,000, and I gave up after a year of only raising 20 and returned the money, and we were really frustrated by the process, and then found out that there were this, what seems so basic now, it's easy to digitize footage and edit, but at that time it wasn't. So we built our own computers and we made the first desktop feature film. So that movie, actually, it's pretty funny because, we were very ahead of the industry at that time, and everybody always told us that we couldn't do things, that we couldn't, that you couldn't make a film on a desktop PC at that time, that you couldn't take it out and show it digitally, that you couldn't, you couldn't beam it into space and have it downloaded to multiple theaters, which we ended up doing. But I think there's one really great story that I want to tell very briefly that I think has a lot of relevance to today. And when we were doing that, just to put it in perspective, there was no digital projection anywhere, and we had made this film and we were trying to get it out there, and we were rendering it away. It took like 80 days to render the movie on our 166 megahertz system with 48 megs of RAM, and it was really kind of bleeding edge, but it was something where, I was like, oh, well, this is great. There's these new projectors, DLP technology at the time, and of course this is brilliant. It's like cinema from the past meets cinema from the future. People will give us these projectors, right? So I sat down and I wrote these letters, and I wrote this really thing about talking about the difference between the two and where we thought cinema was going, and it was like crickets. And at the time the projectors rented for about, I guess probably about $6,000 a night, and we were getting closer and closer to the time that we had a screen, and we had booked all the theaters. And so in a moment of desperation, I sat down and I purposely addressed them to the competitors, but left the competitor's address on it. So Sony went to Barco, but they saw Sony on it, and Barco went to Sony, and they saw Barco on it. And the phone rang, and all of them called, and I ended up with a free projector anywhere in the world for 2.5 years, anywhere I wanted to take it. So I think that it has relevance. I'm not saying that you have to, lie, but sometimes
whatever it takes, though, is basically.
Exactly.
No, good point. It is whatever it takes, and both of you are great examples of that.
Great manipulators.
Well, you're filmmakers, damn it. But Lance, when you were dealing with Last Broadcast and the reach outs, and of course there's comparisons that have been made to Blair Witch, which we won't mention any longer after this.
That's okay, I don't mind.
Well, no, it's just, again, Blair Witch was a very interesting phenomena at the time. So how did that compare to your experience with Last Broadcast, and where are we now with head trauma and that development?
Sure. Well, in terms of the Blair Witch stuff, our film just predates the film, and check out The Last Broadcast, check out the Blair Witch Project, and watch the films, and there are similarities between them and stuff. But I think fundamentally what happened with The Last Broadcast is when we were approached with distribution deals, we felt like they weren't what we wanted. I think I remember the deals that we were getting from major studios for that film at the time were $250,000 to $300,000 for all the rights, and that sounded really great, because we made it for $900,000. We could bury it in the backyard if we wanted to, and it didn't matter. But we had already started structuring interesting deals. I had gone to Hollywood Video at the time and convinced them that they should pick up the film, and they had picked up about $300,000 worth of units of the movie. So at that point, without selling any of the rights to the film. So we had turned down those deals, and I'm glad we did, because in the end we ended up making like $4.5 million. So when it came around to time to make the Head Trauma, I looked at it and I said, wow, I've retained the rights to my own work. I've been able to repackage that work over and over and over again. It's distributed in over 26 countries around the world. And I looked at that and I said, wow, sure, DIY is a time-consuming process. It takes a lot of your energy, but at the end of the day, I own my work, you know, and that was something that I was able to turn around when I made Head Trauma and leverage that. And so I made Head Trauma and made a decision. I took two paths with it. You know, one was traditional and one was DIY. And I said, okay, I'm going to submit to the festivals because everybody always tells you should submit to festivals, and maybe there's this Cinderella story of somebody's going to come and they're going to buy your film. And then I ran a DIY route at the same time. So at any point, I had an option. I could do what I wanted to do. So when the deal started to come around, because it played at the LA Film Festival last year, I actually had decided when I was accepted that I was just going to go and release it on my own. You know, I said, you know what, it doesn't matter. I'm going to use the film festival as a springboard to this release. So I'm going to go there instead of looking at, I guess I was one of 70 filmmakers. And I was the only one there that was like, I don't want distribution. I have my own. And I
it's
had already,
mainly a PR platform at that point.
Exactly, totally a PR platform. So anyway, I released it on like 17 screens. So I guess the connection there is the fact that it went from DIY, and I said, you know what, that's something that I want to continue, you know, and I continued it with Head Trauma.
Fantastic. You know, Aaron, I guess this is a really great way to segue into what your experience is, because from watching the information in the podcasts on Four-Eyed Monsters, it seems that you started off with following the festival circuit. You got a very poor offer and then launched into this initiative, which do you still have your rights as well?
Yeah.
There you go. So can you discuss that? Because I think that is probably one of the most exciting aspects of this, that process of...
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing is that, yeah, I mean, as it said in the video, that we've made way more through our own efforts than we would if we just sold, similar to Lance's experience, you know, that when you have your own rights, you can be creative with what you do with them. When you give them to somebody else, and even sometimes, I hate to say it about the situation of getting funded by your government, sometimes you don't have the option, if you fund a film a certain way, about what you're going to do with its distribution. You won't be able to take advantage of some of the cutting edge things that could come your way. A sponsorship could come your way. A situation where you're going to get the film seen a lot online could come your way. And it's, you know, kind of, we think about like, well, you know, the standard DVD offer that a filmmaker gets, if they're lucky, they get an offer to just release it on DVD and get a small cash advance and rarely see anything later. That does not make a filmmaking career necessarily, because they'll put in a tiny bit of effort, you know, and if it sticks, they'll push it more, but like they're not like really doing much to market a release. But something where you've built a huge audience, and like, you know, to date, the film's gotten, I think, almost 1 million views on the internet. That's the type of, you know, audience building where you have that audience moving into future projects. That actually, I look at that as maybe a platform for a filmmaking career, more so than like, yeah, it was like on a shelf, or it was in a theater for a week, or, you know, things that are so fleeting and just don't give you any kind of a platform for any future thing. Because it you know, one thing that we've noticed is it doesn't change that it's hard to get projects started. It's helpful to be established in some capacity, but to me, that's kind of the main thing, is how can your efforts translate into your next project. And so the more it's seen, and then the more you have access, email addresses, social networking, you know, podcasts, subscribers, things that you can get the word out to people, like the more powerful you are creatively.
So with regard to how you shaped the podcasts, the social pages that you were accessing, was that something which developed reactively? You just went into it, or was there any model out there for you to follow for the creation of this material, and also the outreach, so that you could start building that grassroots connection?
Well, we constantly looked at what other people were doing. I mean, we've been inspired by Lance. You know, last year, seeing what you were talking about at IFP, and then some of the stuff that we've done since has definitely been inspired by just other case studies, other examples. You know, we've been going to film festivals and meeting different people. This girl has a film called The Tribe, and it was on the web, and when she took it down off the web, the DVD sales declined. So, you know, we started just collecting other people's experiences, and that's kind of the cool thing about sharing what you learn in this sort of new space. A lot of people keep blogs. Self-reliantfilms.com is a blog, you know, workbook project. Obviously, Lance runs a workbook project website where everybody's interviewed who's doing different projects. So yeah, there was tons of things to base our information off of, and strategize and see what worked for other people, and then customize it to our own film. Because a lot of people look for one-trick pony answers, like, what's the model here?
Right.
What's the answer? Give me the one-liner answer. And the thing is the answer is that there is no answer. You customize all of this stuff at the moment you're releasing your film. Okay, what's the landscape right now? What's the content of the film? How are things developing? How can I apply that all to my own project? And so that's what we tried to do.
Yeah, actually, Lance, could you talk a bit about the workbook project? Because again, this is what the usual route has been in the past, is that filmmakers, and arguably was needed perhaps, were very proprietary about their experience and what information they had. And it would seem that the shift is towards sharing information, with the exception of things that you need, like who's signing the check. But it's a vital change, really. So this idea of sharing methods and systems and negotiation techniques, if you could address that.
Sure. The Workbook Project, which is workbookproject.com, is an open source project. I was inspired by the idea of what's been going on with open source software for a while, and I think in some ways some of the most interesting things from a business perspective to the sharing of information is happening in that world. And because I've been doing this for a while, since 97, 98, I guess it's about 10 years, I have a lot of people who will come and ask, because it's hard to become self-sustaining as a filmmaker. It's hard to just, make work and be able to make a living from it. So I would have a lot of people that would come to me and ask me questions. And so basically what I did was I decided to set up a repository of information. So workbookproject.com is, hopefully the idea was that over time people will start submitting how-tos, war stories, contracts, sharing all kinds of things with each other. Because what fundamentally happens in the entertainment industry is distributors or whoever you're usually doing a deal with, they have a boilerplate agreement that they give you. And most filmmakers operate in a void. They don't even know what terms they should fight for. They don't even know what is a good deal necessarily. They're just so excited that somebody's interested. So what I decided to do was set up this project that would kind of break down those walls and have people start to exchange information. So then filmmakers would have their own boilerplate, and it would say, you know what, no, we're not going to give you this, we're not going to give you these rights to this digital thing, or this is how much we demand for this, because I know these 6 other films got it. And so it would start to give leveraging power. And then also it was meant to kind of bridge the gap between technology and entertainment. There's a lot of stuff that's been happening within the Web 2.0 space that basically, I'm sure you guys are familiar with Web 2.0, but for anybody that's not, it's just the idea that applications become easier to use, and people don't have to rely so much on knowing how to code certain things, and people can take APIs, which is still kind of complicated, but some of the elements were meant to bridge social experiences and to make things easier. And so the Workbook Project tries to take some of the things that we've done, other people are doing that are interesting, and laying them out there and showing them so we can just equally exchange it. And then in the end, the idea is that you can pull it down, you can edit it, and then you can upload it again. So that's basically the idea of the Workbook Project. It's free. There's no agenda to it except to hopefully spark change. That's really the whole purpose.
Excellent. Aaron, what have you got?
I didn't hit send.
Okay.
Aaron, Four-Eyed Monsters has a really very well-established web presence. How long did it take for that to get established? And people use the terms tipping point and the concept of viral marketing all the time. Putting that aside, when did you know things were working? Was there actually a moment, and what was working?
Well, it was kind of an interesting timeline, because we premiered the film at Slamdance 2005, and that was the first. Getting accepted into the festival was the first outside sort of acknowledgement that the world was aware we were doing this and that there was any interest, which was a surprise, because we didn't even really know, honestly, working on it. Like, I don't know, we're just doing this. We're imagining kind of this imaginary, like, one audience member that, what are they going to think at this scene? Like, how is this going to, affect them or whatever? But we didn't really think of, like, oh, yeah, we're going to, show this to the world necessarily. But then as you know, we were showing the film at Slamdance and seeing like people's responses to it and getting that feeling of like, oh my gosh, people are like understanding what's in my brain, you know, kind of weird sort of drug effect of that. It's sort of like, well, we should keep this going. We should get it out to more audiences. And that was this sort of, disappointing, like, well, no distributors are really offering to do anything. So we did what you're supposed to do the festival circuit. We did that for about 9 months, went to, to date, it's been to over 30 film festivals. And during that time, kind of just shot a lot of stuff of the experience. And that material ended up going into the video podcast. And we did actually post a few videos as we were going. At South by Southwest 2005, we did a daily video blog. And that maybe was when we also first started to notice sort of the power of video on the web and how that can actually really like mobilize an audience, because, it was our second film festival. It's no longer our premiere. We lost our premiere virginity. So how are we going to keep this engaging and interesting for the industry, but also for the audience? And so just kind of shooting daily, like what we happened to be doing at in Austin, where we had never been, and what was going on with the rest of the festival and everything, caused people to start to blog about the film during the festival, and even say in the movie theater, like, yeah, these guys are doing like a daily video blog. It's like crazy. And they were funny and just kind of casual and whatever. So really we wanted to take that effect and apply that to bringing our film to a larger audience. And we did that at the end of 2005 when the video iPod was announced October 12th, 2005. We knew that was coming because we looked at some MacRumors.com website that was telling us, like, in a couple days this is going to be happening. So we're like, well, let's hurry up and get our first episode posted. And so that ended up being a really good synchronized kind of thing where everybody was like, oh my gosh, this is going to change filmmaking, portable video like on iPods, and the ability to subscribe to things in iTunes. And, this is before YouTube. So it was really kind of the start of people really getting super pumped about that stuff. So we were right there, and people were linking to our first episode 0. And that was when we knew that we had a momentum started. And so that, I guess, was maybe the beginning. But then through episodes 1, 2, and 3, just the subscribers really just grew, like with every episode, and more blogs talking about it, and more people adding us, on MySpace, and just doing all this interactive stuff. And it was pretty much those first 3 episodes that I think got us established. Also, MySpace featured each of those episodes on their homepage, which at the time they had like 50, I think maybe 35 million users. So we were getting a lot of exposure. iTunes put us on their podcasting directory homepage as well. So that was when it sort of built up, and that was, as it was shown in the video, that when we decided to really, okay, how can we mobilize that audience that we've built? And I think in a different world, in a more futuristic world, we could have reached that critical mass, and then boom, the system is already there to get plugged into a theatrical release that's based on where everybody is and how they're interested. But again, I identify with your stories, Lance, where you're just like, oh, this should just be a breeze, and then it's like, oh, well, this is an amazing technology, an amazing opportunity that actually is not set up. It's not been done yet, so we have to go out and build it if that's what it takes. So during that time, we continue to put out more episodes and continue to get more requesters. But and then in terms of a real critical mass, I'd say when the film posted to YouTube, that was when it just, the views just came pouring in, because we were on the homepage of YouTube, which is a good spot to be, basically.
Very much so. And I think what is incredibly fascinating as well is, even though the film is, and it's still posted on YouTube for free, you're capable of getting audiences to come out for the social experience. Yeah. You have them directly connected to you, both you and Susan, in a way which is, it might be a little disturbing, I think, for you. But
for me and for other people too.
Yeah, there you go. But they're invested in it, and they have a contact with it, and you can maintain the need to see the film in the social space in a higher resolution, and also do DVD sales without taking.
Well, we're doing a screening tonight at the Gasha Gallery. There's a site called bravenewtheaters.com, and anybody can set up a screening of any film. So, any of the films that are on the site. So anybody with a feature film, if you want people to book screenings, I'd recommend joining this site. Right now, I think we have 5 or 6 screenings on there that people have posted. And yeah, even though the film is available for free on YouTube, people are not only going to screenings, they're going out of their way to set up screenings.
Exactly.
Because they've seen this thing on this little box, and they're like, oh my God, I want to show this to my school or to my group of friends or to my local scene of whatever. And so that's also really exciting, too, to see that. It's when you leave the question up to the audience of how they would like to see something, whether it's an iPod, Apple TV, on a disc as a DVD, you know, on YouTube for free, sponsor supported, in a theater with a bunch of, you know, like-minded people that have also expressed interest in seeing that film, they will make the choice, and they might even choose all of the above. So it's better that you actually give them all those choices, and that's totally counter to Hollywood's approach of like, we're going to control every single aspect of how you can see it, and that's just a dying aspiration. You can't control it. So, you know, our belief is that you let go of that control and you let the audience control, and they're going to be much more intelligent than you ever would be with those decisions.
Well, this is exactly the landscape which we're entering. But, you know, Lance, you came from your approach on head trauma is actually quite different than what Four-Eyed Monsters has done. I would think that it's much more a strategic approach because you knew how you were going to be bringing it forward from Genesis all the way into ARG cinema, or cinema ARG, I should say. Could you talk about how you developed that strategy?
Sure.
And also talk about cinema ARG, because that is another exciting aspect of how convergent things are right now.
Yeah. Well, as I had mentioned before, with head trauma, it was a decision to kind of take it out. And when I got to LA, the LA Film Festival, I used it as a way to promote the fact that I was releasing it in 17 screens across the country. And when I say that, I actually staggered the release, you know. So I took it and I went to each of those places, and I offset travel with speaking engagements at various universities, film societies, and then I bootstrapped the whole release. So it didn't cost me anything, basically. So that paid for travel, and then when I would go, I used my, you know, social networking pages, you know, very similar to what Four-Eyed Monsters did. Just you know, reached out to the audience, and then they started to sticker for me, they started to flyer for me, and they brought people into the theaters, and then that led directly up to the DVD release of the film. I released the film across the United States, you know, in retail rental outlets, online. You can pretty much get it everywhere. And then part of the strategy after that was I wanted to start to experiment with some things that I had laid seeds for in the beginning. Headtraumamovie.com is an interactive graphic novel. So it took a long time to make it, and we actually started that while we were scripting the film, and I used it as a tool to kind of create leverage. Because I think one of the things that I've realized in terms of making work is leveraging things. You know, you're kind of doing it all throughout the process. If you're trying to convince somebody who has a camera to get their camera and to kind of sell them on what you're trying to do with the film, or if you're trying to convince an actor to stay for an extra couple days because you didn't get everything that you wanted, or if you're trying to convince people not to go into overtime, whatever it is.
We're all going to skip a meal because this shot really needs to get done.
Exactly.
Whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, so like on that side all the way through, it's always about leverage. So I built assets for the movie. I started that way. So the website, which is this interactive comic, was a digital asset for the film. And it was the seeds for what I would come to do 2 years later. Everything took time because it was me, pretty much, my wife, and a couple other friends that would volunteer and help to do it. So it was very doable. You know, it's something that anybody in the room could do. But I planned it out. I said, okay, why wait to market and promote this film until the end, when I get to the end and shoehorn everything in? Why don't I look and build the assets all the way through, build a conversation with the audience all the way through, because that's going to be more valuable for me. So when you go to the comic, there's all these things that are hidden underneath the surface. You know, there's all kinds of strange, you know, it's a psychological thriller. It's based on...
Can I pull up that site as you're talking about?
Yeah, it's a psychological thriller. So it's based on, you know, an autobiographical experience in my own life where, you know, you guys had seen the trailer. Not that I had anything like that happen to me exactly, but
so you say.
So I say.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about that is, you know, the digital assets were all there. And so in the spring of this past year, I started doing these mashup screenings of the film. And the idea of it was the first stage of like what the cinematic ARG is. basic idea of the cinematic ARG is it's an alternate reality game. And so in that incarnation of it, people would come to see the movie. And when they came to see the movie, on the way to the theater, they would be interacting with characters from the film. So they didn't even necessarily know it. We were ringing payphones up and down the street. You know, they'd find like this weird like street preacher on the corner, and he was handing them these bizarre comics. They were like Jack Chick, if anybody knows who Jack Chick is, but they were like these mock religious comics. All throughout the comic were all these weird hidden things. And then when they went into the theater, well, actually, when they made their way in the lobby, we had all this cool interactive stuff that they could do. Like they'd sit in a tent, and when they'd sit in the tent, we'd record them, and they were shot on night vision, and we'd play these weird, disturbing things and ask them what scared them. Then elements of them out on the street when they were playing the game were like recorded with cell phones and then uploaded, and then people could remix all that stuff in the lobby of the theater. And when they remixed the elements, it unlocked all these hidden things. So what was great is when they would get into the screening, we replaced the music. So live musicians and DJs would rescore the film live. And then in addition to that, they could interact with the phone with their interact with the movie with their mobile phone. So basically, similar to what we had done with the site, the idea would be that after the movie played, it would follow them home. So once we collected their phone numbers, we would dump them into like hidden things. So we actually have a version of the head trauma site that that when people would get to it, they could add their phone number, and when they went in, they would be there. We would know they were there. And when they get to a certain point, we would execute a call and call them in their house, on their mobile phone, on their landline. And then when they answered the phone, it was the hooded figure from the movie talking all weird to them, and then they would basically answer. And when they answered the responses, based on what they said, it would either launch audio or it would launch video at them. And then at a certain point, we'd say, tell us something creepy about yourself. And then we would record what they said, and we'd loop it back over the computer speakers, and then we'd build a fake exit box, so then when they went to click to get out, we knew they were hitting that instance, and we'd deliver something over the phone that said, where do you think you're going? We're not finished yet. So in a lot of ways, it was about this. For me, with horror, it's very pat. The cues and everything are obvious if you're a fan of it. If you've watched it, you know where the scares are coming from. And I was interested in breaking that out into the real world. So starting on Monday, we did a web series for it, and we have a whole ARG that'll expand into the film. And that web series will run each week on a variety of outlets. So basically, I created this web series for the movie for next to nothing. Build a couple sites around it. It's a story about a girl who comes back home after getting these disturbing phone calls late night from her mother, and starts to witness this weird nocturnal behavior that her mom has, and then starts to realize that other people have it too. And so she starts documenting this stuff, and then all of a sudden she's abducted. But she's abducted by a hooded figure similar to the one in the movie, and then within the videos there's all these hidden clues. So like visually you can see all these hidden clues. And what's interesting about that is I'm coming into a release with the film this fall through Warner Brothers, which is a VOD release of the film. So I carved away those rights, and I only gave them the video on demand rights for the film. So knowing how the studio system works, where it's very difficult when you're a small film to get any type of advertising out of them, I went and said, you know what, I'm going to take this cinematic alternate reality game, and I'm going to leverage this as a way to get more promotion for the film, as a way to get better placement within the catalogs, the VOD catalogs. And I've been able to just take that web series and the concept of the ARG and leverage it into about $500,000 in free advertising and promotion through Xbox, MySpace, Stage 6, and a number of other outlets. So all of a sudden, these things that I've been experimenting with are directly benefiting the film. It's not just a novelty, it's actually helping to increase sales of the DVD. It's actually helping to increase, value overseas, and it's actually helping to increase, television deals that I have on the table.
Before we move back to Aaron with a question, the audiences for the live gaming experience, where did they come from? Did you get them through the social page? Was that audience something that you worked and then brought into a booking, or were they part of the process of getting the booking?
It was both.
Right.
Well, no, they weren't necessarily process of getting the booking, because what I did with those live event shows is I purposely broke away from the theatrical model entirely.
Mm-hmm.
I booked them into museums. I booked them into alternative spaces where I would have a minimum guarantee when I walked in the door. So I was basically getting, $5,000 to come in. So I knew, oh, okay, I've already made my money, and then I get a split of the box. Because
Right.
there were certain things that had to be orchestrated, so it was more expensive than just showing the film. So in that sense, I booked it differently, but I did use the social networking stuff. I did use the audience that I had. So some people would come and they were totally in the know of what was going to happen, and other people didn't know. So it was a great kind of juxtaposition between, people who were just like, whoa, this is crazy, and other people who were like, oh, this is great. I went to the one in Philadelphia and this happened. And then it's sitting in the audience, people who were in on it would start talking about things that had happened at other screenings, and then people would hear it, and then they were able to, the hooded figure would call them in the theater, would text them in the theater, and things like that. So once we had those phone numbers, and this is a valuable point, it's all about creating channels around the work. You want to create a channel and a conversation with the audience. So what we would basically do is, once we had that phone number, we could just keep calling them. So we bring them into the game, and so people could come into the game early and knew it was happening, because we would be calling them or texting them,
Right.
giving them certain challenges or whatever it was that pertained to the game. So it was a mixture of audience that we brought in through our social stuff, and then audience that we got through just normal, the person just staggering into the theater or the space and saying, wow, this is kind of neat, to people who had read about it.
Yeah, something that's really quite, we should make a point on here, is that the cost of doing all this, the actual physical outlay of money, which is something as independent filmmakers is vital to understand, is very, very low, is it not? It's you, your wife, your colleague, doing this yourselves.
Yes.
And with Aaron, it's him and Susan, and I believe Brian is working with you quite closely as well. But the actual physical outlay of money, what would you say that if you had to take the $100,000 of credit card debt away, what does the web presence cost you to get to where you are now?
Well, it's interesting talking about the budget of a project that has no start date, has no stop date.
There you go.
It's just ambiguous. It's just an ongoing kind of thing, because the episodes make up 63 minutes of new material outside of the movie, and the movie's 72 minutes, and then all the little videos about our distribution, which essentially that video you saw is a mashup of all these sort of announcement videos that we would make and release to the audience. That alone is another 60 minutes worth of just video blogs and updates and invitation videos and everything. So we're constantly producing things that are around the project, and so yeah, the whole thing was like a 4-year endeavor to date, from when we decided, okay, we're gonna jump into this full time, we're gonna be making this, to where we are now. So the budget is essentially eaten up in just survival costs, living pretty cheaply, but obviously, if when needed, going into debt. And so yeah, we did rack up all that debt, and when all is said and done, though, we will have met our budget we feel meeting our budget is basically getting out of debt, because we got to survive that whole time. We have no debt, we can make new projects, and ideally something will happen down the line where we'll have a project that is funding our next project. That's where I'd really like to see sort of this independent kind of stuff going, where you don't, you can work at whatever level you're at based on the proceeds of your previous project, rather than just trying to get to zero and trying to break even. And in that way, I think everybody can become their own micro studio that green lights their own stuff based on, well, I mean, I've got $100,000 that I made from the last project, I'm going to put that towards this next project.
Right. I guess there's also something which is very intriguing about Four-Eyed Monsters as a film, and what you and Susan went through all the way to the version we're seeing now posted. How much did the film change from its first screening at Sundance to what we're seeing now? And was
Slamdance.
Slamdance, sorry. Sundance, who cares about those guys?
Yeah,
in any event, how much did it
evolution.
change given the interaction with your audience? Because it is
good question.
clearly shifted, especially at the end. It's just a marvelous experience, quite frankly.
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think is that festivals and screenings and traveling around with the film, well, with a film like this where it could be edited so many millions of different ways, I think it's a good opportunity for basically workshopping it. So we didn't necessarily set out to do it that way. We went to Slamdance sort of hoping that this edit was like done. And yeah, you know, the response was great, but then we felt a certain few parts that were just like, I don't know about that part. It's just a little bit weird, but we didn't have the answer for how to solve it for like a really long time. So we just kind of like, okay, we would enhance the film as we went. We had some animation that we just flat out didn't have time to finish. So we did that in between festivals. And, you know, but really I would say the main evolution of the film kind of did happen after we went through the filmmaking exercise of making the video podcast, because we made episode 1, posted it, had all these comments back where everybody's telling us what they got out of it, what they didn't get. And then we're like, interesting. So this concept didn't seem to really resonate. So we'll make sure that in episode 2 or 3 or somewhere down the line, we come back to that and really land that. So it became a real kind of back and forth dialogue where, you know, it's like when you're talking to somebody and they're nodding and like you know they understand. The video podcast was very much that kind of experience, and you get that a little bit from going to a screening, but not in the same way, because we'd get huge emails where people like tell us, you know, stuff about their own lives that it made them think about. And all of that, you know, it's like with any feedback, you're never listening. I mean, filmmakers, I think it goes without saying, you're not taking people's advice. You're not doing what they tell you, but you're listening to what they're saying, and you're listening to like the ideas that your material sparks, and then you're deducing from your own knowledge about your own work and your own kind of desires for where it will be. You're using it as a gauge for how to affect. So nobody ever told us, none of our audience members ever said, you need to cut that scene. And if they did, we would look at it and we'd say, well, what happened just before that? More than likely, it's like something that we're not achieving that has nothing to do with their suggestion. But, you know, so we would take, you know, so with the episodes, I feel like we became better filmmakers because we were just getting more experienced. After that, we went back, did a pass through the film, tightening up a few things, cutting out a few scenes, and adding a couple, you know, cutaways and some stuff to the end. That, you know, the end is kind of a weird part of the movie that could just be extended indefinitely because it kind of catches up to itself. But yeah, I mean, the movie is done though now. So and what we posted in June on YouTube is the final version of the movie.
Cross fingers. But that's an extraordinary journey in itself. But also the film, it's as an experience, is linked now so clearly with the podcast experience and also the web experience. In your next project, and this sort of bats over to you too, Lance, in your next project, what are you going to keep from this experience? And how are you going to apply that to your next project? What will you keep? Will you keep that personal connection, for instance, or are you going on to another model?
Well, we want to delve even further into that. I mean, one of the things that that we've talked about since having made the film, and actually this is an idea that again came from the interaction. Like people were writing on blogs about how our film was basically like life logging.
Right.
So we've taken that idea and said, okay, well that's kind of cool. That's really what it is, because we logged our experiences as we were having them. Either by like writing things down or emailing each other or making videos for each other. That material, some of it got used in the film, and other things were just based on the material of what had happened. Some things were shot and constructed. The majority of it was. So now we're thinking, you know, so now that we're in this environment where we're getting like incredible amounts of footage from our audience, and you know, like we said, there's 70 videos, just people talking about the movie, and they're mainly talking about their own lives.
Right.
So people are dying to share their own experiences. And I think ultimately, like what I've been realizing in that whole dialogue, that's kind of why you're making movies, really, because it's a way to, it's just like talking to somebody and hearing somebody's experience, and you're being like, oh, that actually affects my own life, you know, because there's no manual to how to live your life or how you should react in certain situations. So everybody needs everybody else's stories so they can kind of like, you know, adjust their own existence is sort of the way I've been thinking about it lately. So for our next thing, we want to do something where we put up a concept and then we get tons of people talking about that concept. And then we integrate that into our film. So it's not just a marketing thing or a distribution thing or an audience connection thing. It's an actual film creation thing.
Right.
And that's where I actually am most excited about where the internet's going is yeah, okay, we're messing around. This is the beginning. We're getting some marketing value out of the internet. But as Lance is doing with the text messaging and creating an interactive experience, you know, we're you know, I think every artist is now in a position where if they want, they can create something that's incredibly interactive. And the end product, sure, might be a feature-length film that you watch, but it's also going to be all kinds of other stuff that you can watch, these components, these raw materials, these different versions of things as they're coming together, these different, oh man, head trauma. It's going to be a creepy voice.
Yes.
And you know, so that's kind of where we want to take, that's what we want to take, is the idea of constantly getting things coming in and actually putting them into the work, not just as a marketing thing, but as a way to build a film.
Well, this is you know, to use a term that everybody dislikes, embedding. This is, you are part of your audience experience as well as the filmmaker then, and right back out. So this is an extraordinary situation, really, when you think about it. Lance, we only have a couple of minutes. We have to go right to questions. And Helen, do we have an additional 5 minutes you can give me here? Thank you very much, oh merciless master. So Lance, the same question, just if you can be a little concise. How are you going to move forward with head trauma? And I mean, what are you taking from this experience, which seems to be quite successful and is engaging not just the non-traditional theatrical experience, but also gaming? Where do you go from here?
Okay, well, there's a couple different things that are happening. The web series that I mentioned to you that I'm using to promote the film with, one of the visions that I had for it was to create interest to be able to have it be fully funded. So the website, the web series which launched, it's going to be fully funded without even ever launching. So that all came off of leveraging. So that I'll do that through a very large outlet. And then I'm working on a much larger budgeted film, probably the biggest budget that I've ever had. It's like a $5 million film. So I start casting in October for that, and no, the end of October, beginning of November for that, and we shoot in the spring. And the one thing that I'm kind of taking from all this is I have built out the whole game Bible for it, what the rules are. You know, now when I write things, I will write what those interactions are, what the game Bible for it is, in addition to the scripts and the treatments and the stuff that I'm doing, because as we all know, media consumption is changing. So I'm really kind of taking a lot of those elements and putting it into what I do, you know, and finding, you know, kind of building it from the onset, you know. So when you see something that's written on a wall in a film that just seems like, oh, that's graffiti, it has no meaning, or whatever it is, it actually has meaning, and the characters live outside of just the screen. You know, and they can live in the real world, they can live, you know, in a virtual space, you know. So I'm really kind of taking all those elements and putting it into the mix and continuing this exploration with it, because I think that's most exciting. And what's interesting too is the industry is moving in that direction. They're not really sure exactly how to get there, so there's this window of opportunity where now you can communicate in new ways and find cost-effective ways to do it and find partners to help you do it. Which is exciting.
And do it better than like mainstream or Hollywood ever could, because you're right on that cutting edge.
Well, and also because you have the control over it too. You know, it's not as much by committee. It's,
yeah,
you know, good, better, and different. It's by yourself, but at least at the end of the day, it's not like you're saying, well, you know, you should have seen my cut of it. You know?
God, I've said that a couple of times. Let's go to questions. We could go on for hours doing this. Thank you so much, both of you. Did anyone text message in?
Yeah, me.
You?
It's funny, in New York we got like 22 questions. Okay. You guys are a little text message shy.
we have fantastic people out there with microphones on both sides. If we could put your hand up, and we'll go there, and then we'll go to this young man here.
Hi, I did text message you. I guess it didn't work.
Oh, did you do the at FestMob part?
No.
Okay.
That's where I failed. But what I asked you, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but what new technology online or any sort of technology you guys most excited about for this type of distribution and filmmaking that's coming up or emerging?
Well, I'm very excited about the ability for the virtualization of certain worlds, which you see very crudely with things like Second Life, but I think that offers a lot of interesting things. You've seen it in massive multiplayer gaming for a while, but the idea of like whole communities that can build, new economies that can build, and which creates all kinds of interesting opportunities in terms of selling work or building audience or a discussion. So I think in the gaming space, there's some interesting things that are happening. And then I think you probably would echo this in terms of the ability to have, playlist or recommendation, the ability for people to exchange stuff easily. You're starting to see a little bit more come around with that thanks to things like RSS aggregation services, which is really simple syndication. It's an XML feed. It's just like text. But basically it would say, Last.fm does it a lot, like what Aaron listens to, I can now see what Aaron listens to, and now he can see what I listen to. So that some of that stuff is exciting. Anything around discovery, and being able to have people communicate, but then also around the discovery of the work.
Yeah, I would definitely echo the discovery stuff. That's what's most exciting. There's a couple just really obvious things that I think everyone knows already. Like any film should have a MySpace profile and should also have a YouTube account. And also, I think maybe this is less well known, but Blip.tv. If you create a Blip TV account, then you can actually get all of your short videos that relate to your film into iTunes. And I really am excited about that more so than a lot of other ways to get content, because you're subscribing to it and it's downloading to your hard drive, which then syncs to your iPod or Apple TV or whatever. So, as a filmmaker, it's incredibly empowering to know this next video, whether it's short or just an extra item or whatever it is, has this audience that's established. It's like kind of like being your own television station, basically. And it's all these people that have said, yeah, whatever you make, I want to get that next thing. So that's kind of just like the most immediate exciting thing. But then, yeah, eventually it's anything that's going to enhance discovery, where people are rating things, like on Spout.com, one of our sponsors. I use their site too, because you can mark films that you've either seen with a rating, a quick little review, spout off a review, or you can say, I want to see this film. And so I use it to keep track of films that I want to see. And I'm excited about that, because if that becomes an embraced technology where everybody in this room is walking around with a web version of all the films that you want to see, and then that has your zip code, you don't really need our whole map thing, really, because you've got that information publicly available about what people want to see. So at that point, you really could have a dynamic like theater booking system that's based on, small local 1 mile radius areas, 1 or 2 or 3 mile radius areas. What does that local community want to see? And it might just be something that's like with local politics, or it might be something that's with a local sporting event. But all of that sort of like anything that involves people taking control of the screens that are in their lives, even the communal screens, because that shouldn't be up to TV networks, and it shouldn't be up to studios that are releasing films to 3,000 theaters. It should be local.
Exactly.
And also, I'm sorry, real quick, the Workbook Project, I do a weekly email that touches on like the best stuff around Web 2.0 projects, everything. So, and then we profile a lot of tools. So to answer your question, you can find that.
Good stuff.
From Philadelphia to New York to the labs, and I would sleep in my car and I'd bring it back. And so then I became a production assistant, and then I became a camera assistant. I was a camera assistant and a camera operator, and I was an assistant to people like Darius Kanji, who shot Seven and City of Lost Children, to Harris Savides, who shot Zodiac and a whole bunch of other things, Conrad Hall. So I would work with a lot of people on commercials. So I have a very rich like production background that was just totally bootstrapped. And then I fell in love with technology along the way. I was always kind of into that, and entrepreneurially just always kind of did my own thing.
Yeah, I didn't go to film school, but when I was in high school, there was a ArtQuest program that had a video sort of course where 2 periods a day I could just be in there learning the equipment. So for me, it kind of started just out as experimentation, like, oh, here's like a piece of technology that I can use, this camera or this editing, sort of VHS editing kind of old school thing. So so then, yeah, I also got like internships and sort of assistant roles, just helping other people do stuff. And through that, learned how to do, desktop video editing, and learned how to shoot video and light and do stuff like that. Then, pretty much worked freelance for a long time, just taking video jobs or doing wedding videos or whatever, and then eventually saved up enough money to, not just be doing filmmaking kind of like short projects on the side, but actually jump into my own projects full time, which is what I did 4 years ago. And so I'm 26 now. So, from the time I was 16 till now, I've just been kind of doing all kinds of weird stuff like this. And Four Eyed Monsters, anybody can go see it on YouTube, which I just kind of recommend people do, because it's just hard to explain what it's about. But essentially, it's an autobiographical story about Susan and I and our relationship and how it started on the internet, and how we met up in person and wanted to have a sort of different dating scenario where we wouldn't speak, so we wrote notes to each other, and that evolved into us making drawings for each other, making videos for each other, and just essentially having our relationship be this weird creative project that ultimately evolved into working on a film together. But in reality, we really didn't speak for the first 4 months of our relationship.
That usually happens after the first 4 months. By the way. And it is screening tonight, so I recommend going to see the screening. Where is it showing, Aaron?
Galerie Gachet.
How about asking a question on this side? We got a microphone and a couple of minutes
left. I had a quick question.
Yeah.
Right now, after MySpace was bought, and everybody jokes that it's actually not MySpace, it's Tom's Space.
Fox Space.
Yeah, Fox Space.
Yeah.
There's been a large drop off on my personal fan space. I lost about 1,000 fans in the last 6 months. Everybody's kind of migrating over to Facebook. What do you think is next in regards to the next social networking platform? Any ideas?
I hope it just becomes an agnostic platform. I hope it can just become a collision of all those places, because having to go in and log and build them all up in multiple places that are portal based is a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
So I'm really hoping that it just becomes an aggregate where it doesn't really matter and it can kind of flow. I think that's part of the open ID thing that they're trying to do.
And that's going to happen. Originally, AOL, like a long time ago, didn't let you look at the World Wide Web. Right. They're like, here's the few little things that you can look at on our thing. And that was a profitable model for them for a short amount of time, and then it just wasn't. You just couldn't keep doing that. So I think social networking on the web is not going to be able to survive in this kind of like, we house the world's social networking under our roof. Any kind of interactivity that you're doing is going to be at our domain name, Facebook. And Facebook has tried to open it up with their API, which is a way that any other website can create something that'll work on Facebook. That's a great step in the right direction. And so I would encourage everybody to have a group on Facebook. Sure, go wherever the audiences are at the moment. And YouTube has its own kind of social network happening with videos, and all that's good. But ultimately, yeah, we want to see a universal social networking that works from site to site to site, and that's where hopefully we'll arrive in the next few years.
What's really interesting, though, about Facebook is recently they just opened it up where anybody who's working with the API, they're giving grants to those people who are developing. So it's moved from the point of like, oh, well, this is neat, kind of work with our application layer, to now we're actually going to fund it. So that's something that hopefully translates into a business thing later for film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's get a question from this side of the audience. Anyone up here? Everybody's in the middle. I got to get a mic up there.
Can I ask?
You're not close enough to a mic. You can't ask a question.
She has a mic in her hand.
She brought one with her.
Go ahead.
What are your guys' thoughts on, like, say the internet crashes or whatever? Like, what do you do when? How do you you can't watch these films in 50 years because you don't have like a hard copy,
So in terms of like there being a physical copy of it in some form?
For storage, like you can watch films that were made 100 years ago because, but you can't watch videos that were made 20 years ago.
I try whenever I can to beam my stuff. Like literally, like if I'm when I beam the last broadcast into space for the satellite release of the film, it's out there somewhere.
You did one that wasn't pointed at a satellite. It was just pointed out.
Yeah.
So it will survive indefinitely in the universe.
Exactly. No, but I think in terms of the, it's just unfortunately it's the problem with technology. It's great that it accelerates, but you're always kind of having to kind of find mediums that you can put it on that'll last for a while, and there's always a concern. Like if I went back to the project files that I had from my film 10 years ago. You know, what kind of things do I have to jump through in order to make that happen? I probably couldn't use them in a lot of ways. So I think it's just trying to keep up with what you have and trying to find, you know, new ways to archive it. I mean, digital is great until you have problems where you lose something, you know.
Exactly.
So it can be the same way as physical media, you know, but.
Well, I mean, one tip is I'd recommend any project in Final Cut, when you're done with it, save a Final Cut Pro movie that's self-contained, and that'll be a few gigabytes and take up some space. But save that, burn it on a DVD, so you also have that. And then also save a version that has all the music turned off, so that you can always go back and you can re-edit your thing that way. And then what I'd like to see ultimately is video sharing sites that let you post the thing with no music and post the thing in full resolution. Because right now you're posting your finished videos to YouTube and they're just really compressed. But I do think that, you know, another thing along the lines of hoping to see universal social networking, I'm hoping to see universal web publishing of videos. You put one master, really high quality version online, and then that gets propagated to different servers. And when a site like YouTube shows it, they make a small version from that master.
Right.
You know, and so I think that there'll be better ways to ensure that, like, the main quality version is, like, held and safe. And then just in general, don't be scared of the internet. It's designed to take, you know, nuclear explosions. Literally, the government designed it so that the servers are distributed, and, you know, you could bomb a place, but the internet's going to go on, and you could have net neutrality come over and totally change the way we're able to use the internet in the United States. But you've got other countries and you've got other things. So the internet, short of like some asteroid hitting the planet, I think the internet's a pretty safe way to actually ensure that your work is going to be there, because people are going to download it locally too, and that's another backup.
A comforting thought that after Armageddon we can still watch videos on YouTube. A question over here. Oh, you do? Go ahead, right there.
Hi. What do you think about viewership with regard to television versus internet? Do you think those demographics will continue to diverge? And I'm asking, coming from the place of consideration of broadcast license for television having been such an important part of financing independent films for quite a long time. It's interesting that when you guys talk about television, which I note is almost not at all, it's almost like a peripheral. It's an afterthought, I think, for what it is that you guys are doing. So there doesn't seem to be much of an interest or emphasis or perhaps need to consider television viewership. And you guys are going after a whole different group of people who are growing and perhaps watching less television.
Well, a lot of the work, you know, I mean, television in terms of the viewer habits, you know, I mean, if you look at you know, like DVRs, digital video recorders, TiVo, what that has done to the industry in terms of moving us closer to an on-demand type of culture, it starts to put an emphasis away from normal broadcast television not being as important. That being said, you know, you can see a lot of, at least in the States, you can see a lot of television interests that are basically, you know, embracing new ways to kind of put their stuff up. You know, I think CBS just started experimenting, or they will be experimenting with, like, various like cuts of their stuff. You know, other outlets, I guess it was ABC, started streaming their stuff online and making it available immediately. They're trying to catch up to what cable does in a lot of ways, where, like, if you miss The Sopranos, it airs multiple times throughout the week, or it's on demand. So they're trying to move themselves in that direction. In terms of financing work, it's a little bit different for us in the United States. I mean, you can walk into deals with various outlets, you know, like HBO, if I had an American Undercover thing or something that fit their stamp, A&E, you know, that's kind of a different path, you know, the way we fund work. But I think in terms of the viewership, and I know because I've been brought in to talk to a number of large entertainment entities, they're really trying to figure out how to deal with this loss, especially at a younger age. You know, they have a certain age demographic, but when you go to younger ages and certain, you know, certain elements, you know, certain of their shows don't translate. So they're trying to figure out a way to do that.
But you know some stats too. What are the stats going on with TV versus internet viewing time?
Well, you know, television is still dominant in terms of video. I think, like, there was a ComScore that was 75% of internet time was spent watching videos, and 2.4 billion of those streams came from YouTube. So, but the average length was two and a half minutes. So it's still kind of, outside of people using torrents and downloading stuff, or what Apple TV is trying to do, that's some of the more exciting elements, in terms of getting into the living room.
We're going to have to call it there. It's been absolutely wonderful. We've gone a little over here, and I want to thank our two panelists, Aaron Plumley and Lance Weiler for coming here today. I also want to thank our sponsor, the Vancouver Film School, for sponsoring the panel, and also the Forum for making this happen. Remember, www.foureyedmonsters.com, www.headtraumamovie.com. Go to those websites. Go see the movie tonight. If you don't see this, you're missing a huge opportunity to see something with a group of people.
What time is the movie tonight?
7 p.m.
Give yourselves a round of applause. You guys are good audience.
Thank you.
And one final thing. We're at the Forum, our speakers come in, and we fly them in and we put them up, but we don't actually pay them. So we're very grateful to the speakers for joining us. But one thing that we can do is, you saw on Spout, are you still able to get...
yeah. Everybody here should join Spout.com.
If everybody here goes to the Four Eyed Monster site and then follow the Spout link, and then if you could also please tell at least 10 friends, just so that we can try to get some money back into paying down the credit card debt for Aaron and
selling
Susan.
DVDs.
Yeah, you can buy Head Trauma online. You can buy the last broadcast online, and
Right.
check out the
Spend
site.
money. Spend money.
And Lance's the game is going live Monday?
Yeah, Monday.
It's
yeah,
going
so check
live
it out.
Monday, so check it out.
Can everybody please exit? If you want to speak to them, wait for them to come out of the theater. Thank you.